of Malibu, beautiful Malibu. It's a beautiful day outside, with Rabbi Levi Cunin, who's a co-director of Code7 Malibu for how many years now?
Cunin, 26 years.
Wow, I did not expect that. You look younger. And we're here to discuss Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. And I want to start with a question. And the question is, if you have 30 seconds of the world's attention, the whole world stops, every car stops, every radio tunes into this, and every TV station, every phone all of a sudden has a video on your face, and you're talking to the entire 7-point-something billion people in this world. What is your 30-second message? And I'm going to time it here.
Oh, good. I want to see your timing. Okay, good.
I'm going to time it so you could look at it in real life.
We are not physical beings that have once in a while spiritual experiences. We are spiritual creatures that are having a temporary physical experience. And we're here to get in touch with our higher self, with our spiritual self. There's a purpose and mission on which we are here. Moses brought it down from Sinai, and every human being has a mission in that document, and we should all study it.
When you say we should all study it,
I mean, get present to it, not just study it. Get present to it, meaning, think of it like we are in a matrix. Elon Musk now is talking about the idea that he thinks that we're in a matrix. You know what that means?
Yeah.
So he thinks that we're just in a very, very sophisticated matrix. I'm not quite sure what he thinks and who's controlling it, etc., right? But it's so interesting because the fact that a scientist at that level could be coming into the conversation, that really is a conversation that's ours. And that is that we're in a matrix. And we are all avatars, and each one of us have the controls to what we're here for. So when we get present to our purpose and mission of why we're here, then everything in our experience becomes different. Because we're dealing with and responding to the world that's around us in a completely different way because we're in tune with that. But if we don't do anything to get in touch with it and in tune with it, then the natural being of who we are as animals is the one that's going to be present and the one that's going to drive who we are.
Interesting. Elon actually tweeted a couple weeks ago. He said, one line, he wrote, "You don't have a soul, you are a soul."
There you go. That's the same concept,
So when you say that it was brought down by Moses, right? So again, this was a message that you had for the entire world and that we have to study it. How do you expect or let's say you get into an Uber and you're talking to the driver?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because it came upon me right before COVID, like a couple months before COVID, and I actually recorded some of these, that something unbelievable has taken place in our times. You can pull out your phone and you have something called Google Translate. And now you can talk to people of any other language who otherwise you could never talk with them. And I'll tell you an personal experience. I right here on Pacific Coast Highway. Some guy from Guatemala was giving me a 25-minute ride, and I decided I want to practice my new innovative, whatever you want to call it. Let me see, it's innovative. It's Google's thing. And I asked him if he's familiar with the Torah. And he said, of course. And he was a religious Christian. I said, are you familiar with the rules that God gave to Moses to give to you as a human being? He said, the 10 Commandments. I said, no, actually, that's not what I'm talking about. Because 10 Commandments were given to the Jewish people. Do you keep the Sabbath? Right? So he said, okay. I'd be very interested. Are you interested to know? So I started to share with him. But what I developed personally is not just a way of, it's not of laws, but God wants something, and He wants us to make it happen. And every one of us are important to making it happen. And when we start making that happen, we get to open up a personal portal in our relationship with the maker of this world. And even though it seems impossible to wrap our minds around, that's a longer conversation, but let me at least tell you what Moses has to say about it. And the first one is like Avram Menachai, for example.
Not to eat from a live animal.
Yes, not to eat from a live animal. So the way I introduce it is, because it's when you learn it in the details of Avram Menachai, it's about the fact that we have a responsibility to be compassionate towards all sentient creatures.
Right.
And did I say that right?
Yeah.
and the point is that the point of the mitzvah itself is not to eat a limb from a living animal, but it incorporates also bringing pain to animals. So God gave us permission for this period of time to eat animals, but we're never to lose presence of the fact that This is a living creature of our Maker, which has feelings, has emotions, etc. So people then feel that, oh yeah, I have something I believe in, and then talk about cursing Hashem or stealing. The idea of stealing, as an example, is you believe in God, you believe that everything that happens is happening through God. When we steal, we're telling God He doesn't know how to do His business. When I look out at the ocean, I see a pelican coming from high up in the air and going into the ocean, and boom, he has a fish in his mouth. If God takes care of that pelican, God's taking care of me. If I'm having a hard time putting my pieces together, maybe He's trying to tell me I should go talk to friends and something new will open up. But by stealing, I'm denying His blessing to come in. So I'll just say my personal experience was that by the time we got here, I'm not kidding, the guy was literally crying. He was literally crying. And I felt like, because I wish I would love to get this out to other shluchim also. It's such a simple, people that come from other countries, they don't have a lot of the stereotypes that some of the people here have. They're more open to it,
So you're saying that a low-hanging fruit is usually people who are not necessarily born and bred American, but people, which is true, it happens to be outside of America, people tend to be a bit more spiritual in many cases. So you're saying that that's actually a demographic that we could easily connect with. I find that as well. I'm not American.
Yeah, and it's also I'll tell you, I have a little interesting something that hit me a couple of years ago. We have no idea. You come from South America. We have no idea how many people in South America are Jews and they don't know about it. And that's part of the gullus, that's happening. But it is pretty amazing to me when a person starts to cry when he hears that he has when I told him at the end, I said, you should know that when you learn more about this, I told him where to go. And I sent him to your father's website, by the way. Huh. I texted it to him. And I said to him, when you learn more about this and you start to develop, you're going to have a relationship with God. Nothing in the middle between you and God. And, so I just want to say, it was like, I looked at it like, I felt like I brought that guy the biggest gift in the world. And I felt like I felt so blessed to be a shliach of the Rabbi, to be in that,
So not every interaction ends up as beautiful as that, because not everybody is so receptive to that. So, I mean, you know this better than anyone else. You live probably in the toughest, maybe in one of the most secular states, in the most secular cities. So you probably have to deal with people who aren't so receptive to the concept of there is a God who is in the center axis and I'm not the center axis and I run around God and God has a purpose for me, like this driver that gave you a ride, but you probably have to interact with people who will say I don't believe in God, or that's a Jewish thing, or you're being a missionary on me, or like.
So I want to tell you, first of all, it's true that there's a lot of, there are a lot of people in this community that perhaps are raised more questions than you would find in other communities. Having said that, number one, a lot more people believe in God than we think. But there's a missing link over there. They're missing the possibility of how a creator that's beyond anything we can comprehend would communicate with a human being like Moshe Rabbeinu. So in that regard, there are different types of conversations that you can have, and I've had with people, and sometimes sometimes they're successful and sometimes not. But I think there's always an opening point to it, and the opening point to it is if you believe in creation, right? Then, and this is something I think is like the message that us Chassidim have a big responsibility to impart in the best words possible. But once you believe in creation, then you believe in La'elam Hashem Dvarcha Nitzav B'Shamayim. So that means that everything's happening right now. So it's all happening in the current. There's something happening right now. And I think that when people get a little bit of a glimpse of the mystery, then they're more open to the possibility that maybe you're onto something. Because people have a lot of questions like, well, if God wanted, so why wouldn't He? I'm just going to give you a story that I share with people to put in the context of being open to the fact that maybe we are in a game and maybe I have something to say that makes sense. Okay. So a story about a kid who's 13 and his big thing is baseball, and his father takes him to his baseball game, and everything goes right for him. And by the time he hits out and they forgot they couldn't get to the ball, everything went 100% for him. And after the whole thing's finished, he's the MVP. And now he's in the car with his dad. His dad looks and says, "You happy?" He says, "Well, I'm happy. It's the best day of my life." He starts going through every play what he did. So the father turns and says, son, happy birthday. I paid them all off because I love you. So most people react to that like, that's disgusting. You took away. So part of the narrative, I think that it's all part of Torah, but the narrative that we have to impart to people is that part of Hashem's way of giving us good is letting us participate in making that good occur. So then when we do bring it about, we feel a certain way about it that we simply could not have felt about that if it would have just been. And I think that when there's logical conversations happening about the deeper concept, it's not just the fact that you just got to take it that some guy came down from Mount Sinai, etc. The second thing I try to share with people is I say, we have so many different forms of testament to show that our story is true. 2.5 million people were at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, when we heard it all. Pesach Seders, going back 3,300 years to give us, anchor it in, and just in case, the Tefillin, which has our story in it. So if you don't believe that Mount Sinai took place, after all that evidence, then I can't help you. But if you want to be open and be open-minded, and really open-minded, then think about that. Then wherever you go around the world, that story, that testament that's on people wearing for 3,300 years, it's all the same. So I'm just telling you part of this stuff.
Part of the conversation that you have.
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility to appeal to the logic mind, And the Rebbe always said the words, "Ba'ofen diasparnasen mine." That the difference of Chassidus is that we can actually be sparnas and we can actually be sustained by it. So I think that we have a big responsibility to get into the spiritual conversation in order to have perhaps a deeper impact on people. Because the ideas that we have from Chassidus, they're very deep and they're completely beyond anything that people even pay attention to. You know what I'm saying?
So you're the guy that will have no problem talking to anyone on the street about the Shavah Mitzvah Neach, the 7 Noahide laws. There are people, such as myself, who feel uncomfortable doing that. And what could you tell someone like myself to make me feel more comfortable, more maybe empowered, to open this conversation with anybody without feeling like a missionary, without feeling like I'm a fanatic person? I like to be seen as a normal human, and so what would you tell me?
Well, first I think the first thing comes to mind is that the Baal Shem Tov says, "V'makom shemachshavte shel adam sham hu nimsa mamash." So if you really get, I don't know if
Which means,
what?
In English,
wherever your mind is, that's where you are literally.
Right.
So first of all, I think the number one thing is in the presence, what is going on in your mind when you're having that interaction. And let me suggest something. We have this statement here, I don't know if I had it back then, DP frequency.
Deep in your frequency?
Yeah. DP frequency. Where is it? It's not on here?
I saw it outside,
anyway,
actually.
DP frequency, divine providence frequency. Right?
Yeah, it's a hashtag, I see it.
Exactly. So basically, Baal Shem Tov gave us words and narratives in which to live in the fact that really that's what's going on. That whatever's happening at this very given second is because the Eibusher set it up to be that way. So number one, you could take yourself out of it, so to speak, and look at yourself like you're back in that game. And right now, the Eibusher put before you a person that could be a receiver of something that only you could impart because you have that information. They don't, And I just think, I think number one, just putting yourself present in that, not as a missionary thing, but really you have a gift to share. That's really what it is. You have a gift to share with people. The story I wanted to tell you, Rabbi Adin Steinzatz, he spoke about the Rebbe with the story, but I use it in this regard. He said, imagine, you grow up swimming around the pond thinking you're a duck, and all the ducks around you, you're loving it. And then some bird comes and says, "You fool! You're not a duck. You're an eagle. Spread your wings and start flying." So part of the Golos mentality is that we're locked into the places where we're not sure where we're going to be a missionary, this and that. But we have a lot of oisias, we have a lot of teachings and everything else that could put us into a different frame of mind, realizing that we're in those moments of Golos where, like never before in history, we could do things that never before could be done. And the Golos mentality is what holds us into that place where we start to feel, how's it going to come across, this and that.
Right.
You know what? I look at it like every single time as a practicing opportunity. And I do suggest, by the way, tape yourself. Listen to yourself. And then think to yourself how you could do it better next time. Because we have something that the world is waiting for, and if we're not the ones to give it, then who's going to give it to them? You know?
Right, so let me practice it right now.
Okay.
And it's
First of all, context. How do you know me?
So I'll
put the context.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll put the context. It's very difficult for me. It's very out of my comfort zone. Maybe it triggers things because I grew up in shlichus. I just do a lot of mafsayim, and I don't know. It makes me very uncomfortable. So it's out of my comfort zone. So for me to do this now, okay. So context is, let's say you have a beautiful pier outside. This is the Malibu Pier. There's a cafe. There's a little bit of a boardwalk. People walking their dogs. So I'm gonna go there. I'm going to order a coffee. And I'm going to sit down, and there's going to be someone sitting next to me, let's say, just miraculously not on their phone. And we strike up a conversation, say, hey, do you live here? Are you around here? So the guy will say, no, I'm just visiting. So then, in my mind, I have a gift to share. After coming out of my encounter with you, you're telling me I have a gift to share. And the gift is that the way I understand it is that people's lives could be a lot better and more enhanced, more wholesome, if they knew that they are spiritual beings living a temporary physical experience. So how would I guess, segue into having such a conversation without necessarily sounding like I have a agenda? Or like I'm like holier and better than thou. First of all, I don't even know if I'm holding at that level of being a spiritual being with a physical experience. I think it's work. But secondly, like, how does that interaction go? So like, hey, did you hear about the 7 Noah laws? Or like, how's your day? Or like, are you physical? Like, I'm the kind of guy that I have no issue going straight to the deep end and having a deep conversation with somebody. I actually enjoy that a lot more than small talk. Small talk is the problem for me. That's the stuff that makes me a little bit nervous. But I would say like, hey, are you, maybe Malibu it flies, but like, hey, are you body with a soul or a soul with a body? And like, I don't know how that goes down. So like, maybe you can walk me through it.
I once asked a guy here in Malibu who I knew, he knew me, etc. And I was learning a Meir, and this guy was whatever. And I went to the coffee store. He was standing in front of me. I looked at him and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Are you addicted to your ego?" A week later, he called me back. He said, "Why did you ever say that to me? What were you thinking?" I felt horrible. I want to give you a general principle. It's from a Meir the Alter Rabbi, of the Kia Shefer, just now in the Siddur. So he says over there that whenever you bring a mashpia and a mekabel, a giver and a receiver together, you have to have a mamutz ha-machaber, which means a medium that resonates with both. And an example of that would be, so let's say you want to impart an idea that's too deep for the recipient. Mm-hmm. So you give them a metaphor. That is a vessel that they are able to wrap their minds around. And then you use the metaphor as a vehicle to impart something that otherwise you couldn't impart, you know? So I think of every communication, number one, is how to find that vehicle, how to find that medium. Because there's often, and every person is different. There's I remember hearing the Sikha, the Rebbe speaks about the Yard Yam Ad Yam, the Mashiach will go from Yam till Yam. In Chassidus and Kabbalah, there's a sea of Bina and the sea of Malchus. The practical difference is intelligence versus action. And the Rebbe explains that the reason why it doesn't say Yam Arishan and Yam Achron is because there are different people that will come back to Torah. Some will come back through action. Some will come back through because they got inspired in intelligence. You know what I'm saying? And there are different people in the world. Some people are not interested in a deeper thing, but they're interested in tools of parenting. So I give you an example. Kids, whatever. What kind of parenting tools do you use? Really, I'll tell you the parenting tool I use. We let our kids know that the evil inclination is not them; it's an outsider trying to infiltrate. People go crazy from that. That's the Rebbe taught us. They're screaming at you, Yitzhara, right? Now you got to come. That's brilliant, right? Okay, now you have an opening, and that's just a complete open path.
Right. So I guess the question more specific.
So I think in every single situation, you have to take into consideration what is there. I'm just going to tell you one story that I've used there, I've used in other times, etc., etc. As This story actually happened with a guy who I knew who was over 70 years old, a film producer, and he didn't want to put on tefillin. He never put on tefillin. And it was a Hanukkah, and I just learned a Meir that made me ask him this question, because I really wanted to get this guy to put on tefillin. He was there at the... So I went over to him and I said, I want to ask you a question. I said, where do new ideas get from? How do you get your new ideas, brand new ideas? So he looked at me and he says, I don't know, they just kind of come. I said, so is there any tools that you can do to open yourself up to a brand new idea? So he said, if I had that tool, I'd be a billionaire. So I said, what if I told you I have that tool? So what if I told you I have that tool? So he said, really? I said, for real. I promise you, it's 100%. So he said, okay. I said, but before I tell you what the tool is, I want to share with you a concept, an idea. And all the knowledge that you know in the world, there's what you know that you know. And then there's also what you know that you don't know.
Right.
What would be the next level of knowledge?
But you don't know that you don't know.
I said, so how do you access that which you don't know that you don't know? Is there a way? So he's like, oh my God, that would be only, I never thought of that. And we have a tool. So but in order for you to have the tool, you have to let go of what you know. Because as long as you are stuck to what you know, then you'll never be able to do what you don't know. So he said, okay. I said, are you ready? I said, yeah. I said, you surrendered? Yeah. I said, are you a righty or a lefty? And that was a kakafta. And we put on tefillin, by the way. He did it. And he Pasha started crying like a baby. And he said, but how could he make the Holocaust, So again, I think that every person, I think knowing that you're doing it because the Abisha put you in that situation, and just use whatever tools you have, sometimes as a joke, and sometimes as this, and to have an opening.
What is the opening? So the more specific question, at least the problem that I have, and maybe other listeners have this problem as well, is once I get into the conversation with someone, I have no problem talking about anything. The question is, how do you go from regular small talk? Maybe here you can just ask somebody if they're addicted to their ego. I don't know if I could do that. So like, what is?
That was a unique situation.
Yeah. So maybe maybe any tips like how do I go from hey what's up, beautiful day outside to talking about these things?
I'm going to tell you what I do. Okay. I ask people. I'm just to example. And I think that the Rabbi says use whatever crazy ways you can. But I asked them, have you ever heard of DP frequency? And they go, what's that? I say, you've heard of frequency? Yeah. Never heard of DP? That's that. You went to college? You're kidding me, right? And then you tell them, it's so funny, right? So I said, but seriously, and that idea is that there's no mistakes. What do you think about that? And so there's no mistakes that this just happened, that we just met each other. So just curious, anything come to mind? Why do you think it happened? Maybe something I could share with you that you'd be interested in. It's something that, as a Jew, it's my job to share. And if you're open to it, I'd love to share with you. And some people will be open to it, and some people won't. A lot more people will be open to it, because a lot more people than you believe actually believe in the idea of bashert, and believe that there's a synchronicity.
I remember a story about you.
I hope it's a good one.
Planned Hashgacha Pratis.
Yes.
With the chauffeur line.
Mm-hmm. Which one was that?
I don't know if the story grew a beard or if it's you or if it never happened, but there's this guy that tells you that like he wants you to connect with his mother a little bit and try to bring her a bit closer. But there's no way, she didn't want, so he told you that
where she goes for coffee
and that she loves shofar.
Correct.
She loves the concept of shofar.
Yeah,
so you planned to learn a Meir with somebody about shofar in the coffee. Yeah. So she heard shofar, and you're like, wow, DP frequency, and you blew the shofar. And
that's
the plan of the shofar.
Well, the truth is that it's like the Rabbi says many times. Use the line "ten lechacham v'yech kamed." To give it to the wise person and become wiser. So everything is hashgacha pratis. So if hashgacha pratis, you found out that this person hangs out in a certain place, and you could be there also. That's also hashgacha pratis. You know what I mean? Just because you knew about it doesn't take away the hashgacha pratis of it. They could have ended up not being there. You know what I'm saying?
Right. All right. So let's wrap up with some questions.
Okay.
And here we go. Do they need to do it our way?
What does that mean?
What I think this question means is someone says, hey, I have my own way to make the world a better place. There's your way. There's Moshe, Kabbalah, Har Sinai, some laws that it's a Jewish thing, really, because it's been given to us. But
I think if you speak it that way, if that question comes up, then you got to change the narrative. That question shouldn't come up.
What's the source of it, though?
What I'm trying to say is it's because there are different ways when you talk to people. There are certain words and ways in which when you talk to people, it brings up their defense mechanism. You know what that means? Like when I say, could you do me a favor? Your defense, I don't know, it depends, right? So unfortunately, too often when people share Shabbat Mitzvah Neach, they bring up religiosity in a way where all the defense mechanisms get pulled up, and a person's like, I'm not going to do it. You know what I'm saying? So you have to use words that are more empowering. You just realize that religion is very sensitive, doctrine is very sensitive, and being able to share with them that this is a gift that Hashem has given us. I'm going to give you an example. The map of the soul. When you talk to people about Chacham and Bina Das, people get it because they go through those experiences. So by the time you get to a conversation about the actual Shabbat Mitzvah Neach, that shouldn't come up, because number one, it's the same Torah that all religions respect. It's just that no one ever was allowed to share with them that this is actually what Moses said. This is for every human being. So it's a complicated story. I don't want to get into history, but because nobody did it for him, I'm so glad that this all happened.
Interesting. So what you're saying is, because you didn't mention before that I should say I'm a Jew and it's my Jewish,
Yeah, but again, it always has to be in the context of taking into account the recipient, right, and not being a preacher.
The question is, what obstacles are in the way, both from our end, why we're not doing it, and what would be in the way from this message being received? So the Rebbe spoke about it a lot. He really wanted Shlochim to do it, Chassidim to do it, and you have major Chabad organizations, Mason's not one of them dedicated to this. So what's wrong?
You ever heard of the sign project called Fleas in a Bottle?
No.
So they took a bunch of fleas and they put them in this glass jar, air on top, and they kept on trying to jump out. At some point, they stopped trying to jump out, and then they took the lid off, but all the fleas died in the bottle, in the jar, because they stopped trying. So 2,000 something years of history, Jews shied away from doing anything remotely close to this because of the impact and the result that would have happened. So it kind of embedded within who we were. We don't do that. We don't missionize, etc. I think with the Rebbe's campaign, from everything I've kind of gathered, as much as the Rebbe told us it's our job, the Rebbe never gave us the guidance like he did in other places, like with Mivtzoyim, on what exactly how to go about it. And in fact, even a step further, you could talk to Tzvi Freeman, who I heard this from, or Yossi Lu maybe it was, one of the two, that the Rebbe actually rejected ideas that came towards. And my personal belief is, because I think that the Rebbe's vision of Shabbat Meir was very much meant to be one that would be something that we are able to demonstrate it in a way where this is life. You want to touch the tree of life, this is how you touch the tree of life. And not in a way that is preaching to people, because like the Rebbe told people in our generation that this is a generation of love. You have to bring people in through love. And I don't think that anyone found that the formula, because that addresses the next question. There are issues like homosexuality, which today is now become something that is like a accepted behavior in this country. So obviously, when people get into the more details of it all, I think there's the two things. There's people are afraid to get into the Shabbat Mitzvah Neach because they're afraid they're going to have to address it. They don't want to get into, to get into to debate with anybody. You know what I mean? And I'll just tell you that personally in that regard, I think anyways in general I say that God made human beings with the ability to have certain relations and not, like incest is out. Everybody agrees on incest. Once a person gets more closer into Shabbat Meir, they'll discover that truth on their own, but they'll discover it in a different way, not in a way where it's dogmatic and it runs against all their emotional beliefs, etc., because they'll get the bigger picture of it, godliness, the bigger picture of challenges and all the things, you know what I mean? So I just don't think that in my personal opinion, that anybody ever came up with a formula that matched what the Rebbe wanted in order that it should resonate easily with all human beings. You know what I mean?
Interesting. And why do you think that was? Why was the Rebbe rejecting? Why didn't the Rebbe carve out a path like he did for Mifsaim or for Shluchas when it comes to us sharing what we have with the world at large?
I don't know. I can
Okay.
never know. You know.
Okay.
I can only say is that I think that I know that Baruch Hashem in Malibu, there are a lot of non-Jewish people that are very much they are inspired by Chabad. The people here, Shabbos Bnei Noach, for very very interesting, right? But I also know that there's a very very delicate line when you impart the message of the Shabbos Bnei Noach from being one where you're sharing something that's a valuable jewel that every human being deserves to know about, versus where, once again, some religious dude is trying to tell me how to live my life.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't know that anyone ever came to the Rebbe with an idea that, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but with an idea that would resonate with how the Rebbe wanted it to resonate with people. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay, one last question. How important is it?
When you're looking about all the things that are going on right now with all the social injustice, et cetera, and the response to it, you see what a world that it lacks the conversation of a Beire Elam Manhigai, creator and conductor to the world who takes interest in all the details, is lacking in the conversation. So we can't fight the darkness, but we could inspire people to realize, like we started, like that we are souls and we have bodies, So I don't know that there is another way for us to change the behavior that seems to be festering in the dark sides of people.
Right. Well, when you say we have souls, a lot of us are conditioned to believe that the soul, neshama, Jewish soul. What's up with souls of people who aren't Jewish? What's the difference between the two souls? Because that's also another question that came in.
If in the conversation towards all people, the idea of a soul is very simple. You and I are talking right now. Let's just get present to what's going on. My body is being used by a force that's here now, and one day it leaves me, and it's talking to the same concept of how it's manifesting in you. Before we get into any spiritual conversations,
Right.
So what does that mean? So who's the real you?
Right.
So that's the the idea of the neshama elokis is a much deeper conversation. But the fact is that every human being was created in the tselem elokim, in the image of elokim, which means that every human being has a possibility through their chachma, bin, and das to reflect the higher possibilities and potential of that spirit that, unless we think about it, we talk about it, we understand what the purpose of it is, then it just gets controlled by the bodily instincts of who we are.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay.
Anything?
Hope I convinced you.
No, you did. I think that was a very clear distinction and a very clear awareness that, like, at the end of the day, any living being has a soul, and that's the level of soul we mean that when we say that.
And where does the soul live? The soul is in your blood.
Right.
And when you cut open every human being, the blood is all the same color.
Right.
So the fact, if you think about it, the fact that we're the vehicle for that soul is living in something which doesn't make a difference between the different colors and different races and all that, is that an interesting conversation to have?
Wow, that is very interesting.
So that's where the essence of our life is occurring. So everything else is just the clothing for it. All I can say is the following: Chassidus has unbelievable metaphors. I wish somebody would take them all and put them all together.
Oh, maybe that's us.
What?
Maybe we'll do that next.
I'm saying, but there's so many beautiful teachings within Chassidus that just by opening up a conversation of one of those teachings, it allows for someone now to hear something else that you have to share.
Right.
And we have so many things that blow people's minds. The distinction between Primis Adibur, Chitzenes Adibur, and Kol Pnima. You know, the internal sound, and then internal speech, and then external speech. People relate to a conversation like this. They don't know who thinks about this. If you don't learn like mine, who thinks about it, right? You tell you like you have external speech. Well, the most external speech or peripheral is like when you're sleep talking. You don't know what you're saying. But even when people are mostly talking, it's usually not anything internal. People say, I love you all the time to a person who they're just stabbing in the back. So could you say that's internal speech? And then there's Dvar Mayitzim Min Halev. Then there's words that come from your heart. Now that's something different, that's something unique. Could you remember an experience like that? So I'm just giving an example that here you have a beautiful conversation. There's so many of these. There's a beautiful conversation that opens up a person to ideas that fascinate anybody who has a little bit of intelligence. And again, that opens up a channel to, wow, tell me more about whatever. You know what I mean?
Very interesting. Is there anything else you want to tell the audience?
You know, we have to look at it, the fact that we're in a very, 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 very deep gullus. And I think we have to think we're Star Wars. I think we have to, I think we have to realize that if you, and because we are connected to the Rebbe in this great force of darkness, something that we may not think that we're capable of, we are. Something that we may not think could be a channel for, we are. And we have to just see ourselves like that, and we're at the end of the Megillah, and Mashiach is about to come, and we want to look back at these days and know that we gave it everything we got. We used every opportunity, we used every encounter to give it all we got to make it happen. So,
amazing.
You should feel blessed.
Thank you, Levi.